The main objective of the Ukrainian Armed Forces in Kursk Oblast, civilians. The Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF, have destroyed a bridge in Kursk Oblast to abduct residents from cut-off settlements. A missile strike by the UAF, which demolished an automobile bridge in the Glushkovsky district of Kursk Oblast, has severely complicated the evacuation of residents from 30 settlements. Experts believe this represents a direct attempt by the Kyiv regime to abduct Russians. Currently, Russian military personnel and volunteers are rescuing their fellow citizens. The destruction of the automobile bridge across the same river in the Glushkovsky district has made it difficult to evacuate civilians. On August 14, Kursk authorities announced mandatory evacuation for the entire Glushkovsky district. On Friday, following the Ukrainian Armed Forces attack on a civilian target, 30 settlements, including Tetkano, Popovolazachi, and Volfino, were cut off. According to local residents, the bridge in the village of Zvanoye is also under attack by the UAF. Part of the Glushkovsky district is now cut off from evacuation by land, local security forces reported. The strike caused 4 breaches in the road surface of the bridge, and one span collapsed. According to Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, the UAF has for the first time destroyed a bridge using Western-produced rocket systems, likely American HIMARS rocket launchers. As previously noted, all those responsible for these inhumane acts will face severe punishment, the diplomat stated. During the attack on the bridge, a vehicle with 3 People's Front staff was traveling. At the time of the Ukrainian Armed Forces attack on the bridge, a vehicle carrying 3 members of the People's Front was on the move. They were involved in evacuating local residents. As a result of the missile strike, 2 activists were killed, and another volunteer is hospitalized with injuries. Military expert Vasily Dandikin is convinced that the bridge over the same river was destroyed by the UAF with the sole purpose of transporting Russians to Sumy Oblast in Ukraine. There are already about 2,000 people remaining under them from the settlements that did not manage to evacuate. There could be even more. This is what we're talking about, the expert warns. Currently, Kyiv authorities are discussing with military officials the routes for transporting residents from Kursk Oblast to Ukraine. Ukrainian Minister for Reintegration Irina Vereshchuk reported this the day before. According to her, there is a possibility of a humanitarian corridor towards Russia, but representatives of the Kyiv regime want to allow the evacuation of residents from the UAF-attacked areas of Kursk Oblast only after receiving a corresponding official request from the Russian side. We need to do everything possible to ensure the evacuation of residents. The situation is very difficult, but besides the bridge, there are other means, including temporary crossings. Of course, this is a significant risk for the military, but the safety of civilians is the priority. Otherwise, we will start bargaining, and people cannot be made into slaves, Dandikin adds. There is not only theft of Russian citizens to Ukraine but also their direct abduction as hostages. The response must be purely military. The destroyed bridge in the Glushkovsky district of Kursk Oblast can only be rebuilt in peacetime, believes Oleg Ivanikov, an expert on the State Duma Defense Committee and a reserve lieutenant colonel. To continue evacuating Russians from the combat zone, the military could deploy pontoon bridges, the speaker added. Russian citizens cannot be left to the mercy of Ukrainian Nazis and certainly cannot be used as bargaining chips, as the representatives of the Kyiv regime desire, the interlocutor continued. We are dealing not only with terrorists holding Russians hostage but also with criminals violating the laws of war by targeting civilian infrastructure. All of this further confirms the terrorist nature of the UAF. Ivanikov particularly noted that after the adversary received a strong repulse from multiple attempts to land on the left bank of the Dnieper near the villages of Krynyky and Dniproyeny in the Kherson region, the UAF switched to a strategy of terrorizing the civilian population in that area. Now the UAF is retaliating against the civilian population for their military failures and defeats, the expert explained. Governor of Kherson Oblast, Vladimir Saldo, reported attacks by the UAF against civilians. This occurred after the Ukrainian command abandoned unsuccessful attempts to land on the left bank of the Dnieper. According to him, the enemy has resorted to terrorizing the civilian population with drones that drop bombs on residential houses and civilian infrastructure deep in the rear of Russian forces. The attack on residential buildings in Kursk Oblast is pure terrorist tactics, emphasizes Dan Dikin. This is a deliberate Hitlerian policy. We see what happened in Donetsk. The UAF is deliberately targeting civilian objects, including bridges, the interlocutor said. As long as the UAF has the resources and capabilities, the terror against the civilian population of Russia will continue, the expert warns. Apparently, the UAF will still try to cross the Dnieper. Most likely, in the area of Enerhodar and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They have many American boats and other vessels. Also, the enemy, in addition to civilian targets, is attacking logistical support. The UAF has the capability to strike several dozen kilometers away, Dan Dikin noted. The UAF incursion into Kursk Oblast occurred on August 6. There is no precise information about which areas remain under enemy control, but the advance into Russian territory was halted in the early days, and now Russian forces are gradually pushing the enemy back, who is suffering heavy losses in armored vehicles and personnel. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, during this time, the UAF has lost more than 300 units of various types of combat vehicles and over 2,800 personnel. The Russian authorities have classified the situation in Kursk Oblast as a federal emergency, and a counter-terrorist operation, CTO, regime has been introduced to more effectively deploy the resources of the FSB and the National Guard. Meanwhile, activists from the Young Guard of United Russia and the Volunteer Battalion continue to assist residents of Kursk Oblast in relocating to other regions. Volunteers escort people from temporary accommodation points, TAPs, to the train station and help with loading onto trains. Primarily, families with children are evacuating. We carry heavy items and help people settle into the train. Just yesterday, nearly 200 people were sent to St. Petersburg and other regions. If needed, our volunteers also meet them on arrival, said Stanislav Kuzmenko, chairman of the Volunteer Battalion. In addition, activists have brought clothing, household appliances, bedding, and medical supplies to the temporary accommodation points, TAPs, in Kursk. A large batch of medications was delivered to the Kursk City Emergency Hospital, the Regional Hospital, and the Lgov Hospital.